Hi everyone, I am Trisha Lin. I'm the professor of the Radio and Television Department, College of Communication, National Chengchi University in Taiwan. And I very welcome the new students to join us from, I think, the Philippines. And also particularly excited that we are going to have a very enriched session about the Philippine new media research with my ex-colleague, Professor Fernando Paragas, um, and also he is my excellent research collaborator. So Professor Fernando Paragas is the professor from Department of Communication Research, College of Mass Communication of the University of Philippine Diliman, and he received a PhD in the mass communication at Ohio University as a Fulbright scholar. And we used to work together at the Working with School Nanyang Technological University. And we shared a similar interest in new media. So we have collaborated research projects, including location-based mobile advertising in Singapore and also mobile learning, as well as the mobile phone development in China. So today I feel very, very happy that he agreed to have the 3 week sessions with us. And I have to really mention that he has been very passionate in cultivating the young scholars in his country. So he received the highest honor of by the UPD as the faculty members when he was the president of the Philippine Association of Communication and the Media Research and the department chair there. He invited me to join an international conference organized by him. I feel so impressive, and I feel very, very happy to visit his prestigious university, as well as, gave the keynote talk about screen dependency addictions in that occasion. So without further ado, let's just, I would like to extend a very big welcome to Professor Fernando to kickstart the exciting 3 weeks to learn more about the Philippines new media. And I believe we all will benefit a lot from him. Thank you, Fernando. I will hand over to you.
Hi, thank you, Trisha. And I wish you all the best there in central Taiwan. Okay, hi, I'm Fernando. Can you all hear me clearly?
Yes.
Okay, that's good. Okay, so I'll share my slides. So the topic today is new media ecology and convergence in the Philippines. But let us do some quick introductions because this is our first of 3 meetings today. So maybe you can just say your name, where are you studying, and what are you studying. I'll just go through my list here. You can unmute when I call you. So maybe I'll start with John Ponsaran.
Hello, sir. Hello, everyone. I'm John Ponsaran. I teach in the University of the Philippines, Manila. I handle development studies. Now I'm studying professional doctorate in communication in UP Open University.
Okay, thank you, John.
Thank you, sir.
John David Moncada. Are you there?
Hello, good
Yes.
afternoon. Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I am John David. I am from the University of Science and Technology of Southern Philippines. I teach, and at the same time, I'm taking my master's in technology communication management. Thank you.
Thank you, John. JP Tormis.
Hello everyone, I am JD Justine Tormes. I am studying at University of the Philippines, Diliman, taking up BA Communication Research.
Hi, JP. How about Maga Bito?
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Madal Gabito. I'm studying at University of the Philippines, Diliman, and taking up BA Communication Research.
Thank you. Emre Man.
Oh, hello everyone. I am Makon Reman. I'm studying at the University of the Philippines, Diliman, and I'm taking up BA Communication Research.
Thank you. RA Arsenal.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ralph Arvic Arsenal. I teach here at Biliran Province State University and currently pursuing my PhD in communication.
Thank you. How about RA Bautista?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Roel Nino Bautista. I'm a journalism lecturer at the College of Mass Communication at UP Diliman. I'm also taking my master's at Asian Center, also at the University of the Philippines in Diliman.
Thank you. Renz Alcazar.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Renz Kevin Alcazar. I am a lecturer from Cavite State University, and I'm currently taking up Master in Communication at the Polytechnic University of the Philippines. Thank you.
Thank you. How about Artie Torres?
Hi everyone, I am Rachel Torres. I am studying in the University of the Philippines, Diliman, taking up my master's in media studies, majoring in broadcast.
Thank you. So you've just heard from the students from the Philippines. And so may I now request our friends in Taiwan to introduce themselves.
Okay. Hello everyone. My name is Melissa. I'm from France and I study in a business management school.
Thank you, Melissa.
Welcome.
Who else is there?
I don't know if Lucas is here, but he study in a business school in Germany.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all. I don't know him more.
Okay, but you are from Germany, right?
We're not from the same school. I'm in France and he's in Germany.
Lucas is the one from Germany.
Yes.
Okay. Is Lorna here? Thank you. Who's?
Hi, I'm Lorna, and I'm studying in National Chengchi University, and currently it's in the IMIX program, International Communication Studies.
Thank you. Who's next? Ming Ming? Yes.
Ming Ming, okay.
Hello,
Hi, Ming Ming.
I'm Ming Ming and I'm also from Chengchi University and I major in radio and television.
Thank you, Ming Ming. How about Ari?
He's not here.
Ari is not here.
Okay.
And I'm also from Chengchi University. And I'm
Hi, hi, Esther.
Yeah, I'm currently studying, taking the master program in communication.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Wow. Very nice. So we are a big group and we come from different places. But today, we are going to learn about the Philippines. So the idea, this is a presentation about the Philippines, especially if, can you still hear me? The camera has frozen.
Yes.
Okay, so I'll just continue.
Yes, sir.
So the idea, we're talking about media convergence, but you see, when we talk about convergence, it's not just the media overlapping with each other, but it's also media being connected to the community itself or the country where the media operates. So we're going to talk about social, political, economic, and cultural issues, and then how emerging technologies affect media, internet, and mobile industries. And then hopefully, what you'll get today is a way of looking at communication and media. You may notice or you may be worried that there will be so much information today, but don't focus on the names and figures because then that will be information overload. Instead, focus on the analysis that I will share with you today. So my presentation, I will talk about the Philippines and then our long history. So our history from even before the Spaniards arrived here in the Philippines, because I think when we look at media, then we have to look at the long time frame to understand why we are here right now in our relationship between our country and the media. And then we're going to talk about the Philippine media right now and how it is owned by very few people and corporations. And then we'll end with a talk on press freedom in the Philippines. So here, there's the Philippines, and you can see we're very close to each other. You can, from if you look at the map of the Philippines, you see the island of Luzon at the top, right? You know that some of the islands beyond Luzon actually get signal from Taiwan because they are closer to Taiwan than Manila. And the signal is stronger from Taiwan than in Manila because also there's no interference. There are no mountains between the islands of northern Philippines and Taiwan, whereas there are a lot of mountains between the north and Manila where the uh, main transmitters are located. So, and you know, there's also evidence that before there were land bridges between Taiwan and northern Philippines, and our ancestors walked. Some of them walked from Taiwan to Luzon Island. So we're quite connected to each other. Our country is quite big with 110 million people, almost equal male and female. Our population is still fast growing at 1.3%, much lower than before where it was really doubling, but still 1.3 right now. We're quite young with 26 years old as the median age. And you can see how this will translate later on into internet and mobile use, into mobile and technology adoption, because we are a quite young population. We are quite a young country. Filipinos tend to think of the country, we ourselves tend to think of our country as being agricultural, but the reality is we are almost half urban. So 48% of Filipinos now live in urban centers, and you can see how living in urban or city areas connects to the use of different technologies. Okay, and then we are very literate at 98%, and the literacy rate is equal between men and women. So I'll go back to some history. 34 years ago, what happened? Many of you weren't born yet. 34 years ago. Maybe your parents haven't even been dating, haven't met each other yet. 34 years ago. But what happened in the Philippines? In 1987, we had a new constitution. And in that constitution, you can read here that communication and media are especially protected in the Philippines. So our Bill of Rights states that the privacy of communication and correspondence shall be inviolable except upon lawful order of the court or when public safety or order requires otherwise, as prescribed by law. So essentially, our freedom of speech is very important. It is reinforced by Section 4 that no law shall be passed abridging the freedom of speech, of expression, or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and petition the government for redress of grievances. So you can see that communication and media are especially protected in the Philippines. And this draws from a long history between the press and our democracy. But this also has issues right now on our current situation here, both politically and technologically. So I'll go back now. That was 34 years ago. This is our current constitution from 34 years ago. But why is there a special protection for communication and media? So I will now go back to a long time ago. So a long time ago, this was even before pre-colonial period, we had our own writing style. So it's called baybayin or to spell. So we had our own alphabet. And then people used the Carabao horn. Are you familiar with the Carabao horn? So we used to use Carabao horns for signal and for a long distance communication. And then we had people called umalahokan, who are the town criers. So they would call people to assemble, etc. So from even before the colonizers arrived, we were quite a democratic society with assemblies like this. But it was also much an oral society. Maybe in your previous classes, you have studied about orality or oral traditions. And the woman here is called the binukot, or a princess, actually. She's a woman of higher status, and she doesn't go out of the house from birth. She's not She's not allowed to be exposed to the sun. So she's protected, and her main duty is to remember the community memory. So she remembers all of the chants, all of the songs. Essentially, the knowledge base of the community, it resides in the binukot. We also had a lot of dances, but you'll see also that we are very diverse. So from the north, we have the first picture. From the south, we have the second picture, Singkil. And then the third picture, we have the Tinikling from the central Philippines, or from central Luzon. So you can see this was the pre-colonial period where people were talking freely to each other. So there's a history of being equal. And then you can see here, this is an example of a chant, I hope it plays. Hope it doesn't play. But you can see here, these are girls, and they are singing the chant called Hud Hud. Okay, it's a chant from northern Philippines. And what is beautiful here in the chant is that the story is told from the female perspective, from the woman's perspective. And the main chanter, or the one who chants, is a woman. So you can see that the history from before was framed from a very feminist, from a very woman-centric lens compared to what happened afterwards in the colonial period. Okay. And then what happened now? Spanish colonial period. The 500 years ago, 1521, the Spaniards arrived here in the Philippines. But what we know from it is based on a Spaniard's memory from what the Spaniard wrote before. So this is very important for us, and in communication and media, we are the chroniclers of our current generation, of our generation. So whatever we write down gets to be passed down to across generations. That's the role of communication media, is to document the living history. So from 1521, we had the chronicles of this man, Antonio Pigafetta. And then, but they lost. In 1521, the Spaniards lost, and so they had to return to Spain because the local chieftain and his people were able to defeat the Spanish group or armada. But eventually, they returned in 1543 and named our islands Las Islas Filipinas. And then what do we know from that period? Again, it's from this Boxer Codex from 1590. So these are illustrations of people's culture then, of people's way of life. So you can see, again, whoever writes down what's happening gets to document the history for future generations. So this is what happens when we really appreciate the role of communication and media in society. So it was very print-oriented societies before. And then 300 years later, there were several revolts, but 300 years later, the Philippines got independence. But what happened before? In 1521, when the Spaniards arrived in the Philippines, they held the first mass. So the Spaniards really wanted treasures, but they also supposedly wanted to spread Christianity and Catholicism. So in 1521, they held the first mass in central Philippines. And throughout the Spanish colonial period, they did a lot of church building. Why am I mentioning this? Because now you can see the oral traditions from before. Remember the singing and dancing, the town crier. Essentially, what happened, the Spaniards were able to use those traditions and appropriate them for Filipinos to communicate to them. So if you can see, this is a typical church, an old typical church in the Philippines. This is in San Agustin, in the walled city of Manila. You can see the big church, right? So this is mass communication from before, one person communicating to many. And then there was no microphone. So the priest, in front of the altar, in front of the front part, in the front part of the church, you can see the bottom picture. There's the pulpit, and so the priest stands there and delivers the homily. So you can see that the priests before were very important in communicating to the public. So they were very influential, for better or for worse. But for the Filipinos, becoming a priest was very important. It was like an upward mobility. However, in 1872, there's these three priests, Gomburza, and they were accused of uh, making Filipinos protest against Spain. And so they were martyred. They were guillotined. They were, uh, they essentially they were choked to death using the guillotine. So why is this important? Because for the longest time, Spain used the pulpit, the priest's pulpit, to communicate in big masses to Filipinos. And then now Filipinos using the same platform to protest against the colonial power. Look at the date, 1872. And then our national hero was born in 1861. So he was 11 years old. Jose Rizal is our national hero. And he was born 11 years before. He was 11 years old when the priests were martyred. So this made a very strong impression on him that Spain was very cruel. But, I'm simplifying things, but essentially that's what happened. So in 1887, he wrote one novel, which is called Touch Me Not. And in 1891, El Filibusterismo, or The Subversive. So these two novels were very important in mobilizing Filipinos against Spanish colonial period. Rizal also started this newspaper, La Solidaridad. Eventually, they also formed a team called La Liga Filipino, or the Filipino League. You can see again, very print-oriented. So this is still print. The two novels, Noli Me Tangere and El Filibusterismo, were published in Europe. But the fight was happening here in the Philippines. So how did they bring back the very revolutionary novels back to the Philippines? Maybe you can imagine this was very conservative society. Of course, the novels were not allowed in the Philippines. They were in Europe but had to be brought to the Philippines. How did you think they were brought to the Philippines? Maybe some of the Philippine students know the answer. How were the books brought to the Philippines according to stories then? Huh? Okay, imagine this was 1890s. Women wore big skirts, right? Big, long skirts all the way to the ground. So some of the women would put the books underneath their long skirts. And then to bring the books from Europe to the Philippines. And because before, it was very rude, it was very impolite for men to look under women's skirts. I mean, it is still bad now, right? But before, it was really against the standards of the time. You never look under the skirt. So they were able to bring the books to the Philippines by putting them under the skirts of the women. So, but you can see again, it's the role of communication, in this case, the printed communication, in pursuing freedom. At the same time, there's this guy, Andres Bonifacio, almost the same age as Rizal. He didn't agree with him because Rizal was more pacifist. Andres Bonifacio was more revolutionary. He wanted really to separate from Spain. Jose Rizal wanted equal rights with Spain. Spanish citizens. But you know what Bonifacio did to signal or to start his revolutionary movement? In 1896, you can see the bottom right picture, they are holding small pieces of paper. And this is their residence certificate, or for instance, right now would be our passport. So with this, without the passport, you would be seen as a rebel. So for him to signify his revolution against Spain, he and his comrades or fellow warriors tore their residence certificates. So you can see again the use of media, the symbolic use of media in protest. So and I hope again all of these figures, all of these names, all of these dates are probably going over your head. But the main idea here, because we're talking about media convergence, is the dominant medium of its time is very important in the developments of a particular generation. So in this case, it's the printed form, either in novel, either in newspapers, or the residence certificate, being very important as in, for its symbolism and use. Okay? And then the Americans arrived. So in 1898, Philippines declared its independence. However, at the same time, Spain signed a treaty with the US, including the Philippines. So unfortunately, while we declared our independence and we were independent, we became part of the Treaty of Paris Agreement and we fell under the US. We fought, Filipinos fought in the Philippine-American War, but ultimately, American colonialism continued all the way to 1946. The difference was, in 1940, the American colonial period, quote and unquote, was benevolent or was rather kind. Well, from a very colonial perspective, they built public schools where people were taught in English. This did happen during the Spanish period. There was no public education during the Spanish period. Okay. So let's look at some of the firsts. In 1811, the Spaniards had this newspaper published by the Governor General, by the big guy from Spain, but it was only for the elite. Compared this to the Americans who had mass communication already. So in 1906, the first English weekly, and then in 1920, the Philippine Herald. You can see the guy here on 1920, he started the newspaper, the Philippines Herald. He would eventually become president of the Philippines. So you can see the power of media to make important personalities. And this is true for the Philippines, as I will show you later on. So Manuel Quezon had the newspaper, had the dominant platform, and he was also an important political person. Now we have concerns about that, for political economy, but that was the system before. In 1897, the first movie was shown, but European movies. Finally, in 1910, the first movie was shot in the Philippines, and it was already in English. So you can see just a decade or so, such a big change from being very European in orientation. The Philippines shifted to America in its orientation. The first radio station was in 1924, and in 1953, the first TV station. We were no longer a colony of the United States in 1953, but because American TV shows were cheaper to buy rather than to produce local TV shows, then a lot of the content shown on TV before were American. It was only in 1961 where we had the first local TV show. So you can see the American style of colonialization, of colonialism, was mass in orientation. Rather than catering to the elite, as the Spaniards did, to control the masses, the American colonial period used mass media, used mass education to promote its colonial agenda. So you can see the role of communication and media in the colonial effort. And even after, the Americans left in 1946, but the influence continues because of the educational system they instituted and the mass media content, which we still see now. And then fast forward, in 1972, President Marcos declared martial law. And what did he do? First, there was a significant control of media. No? So shut down, he closed private media, journalists and media owners were arrested, there was significant censorship, and then once some media organizations were allowed to open, only those which supported him were allowed to do so. Even religious publications were not allowed to operate immediately, and foreign journalists were expelled, or their visas were rejected. So you can see the late President Marcos knew the power of media, and those who were not supportive of his declaration were closed. Martial law was lifted in 1981 when Pope John Paul II visited the Philippines. So you can see that even if the Americans really didn't put much importance on Catholicism during its period here in the Philippines, Catholicism remained very strong. So the Americans were here for almost 50 years, but the influence of the Catholic Church persisted even with the secularism of the United States, or because they didn't really support the Catholic Church. In fact, the American government bought a lot of the properties of the Catholic Church. Anyway, so martial law was lifted in 1981 for the Pope to visit the Philippines. And then, so 1981, 1983, Ninoy Aquino was assassinated. His wife ran for presidency. And then there was the People Power Revolution because there were allegations that Marcos cheated in the snap elections then. So these are the people who protested. But you can see the media also played a significant role in these demonstrations. So in 1983, this woman, Mrs. Apostol, opened the Mr. and Miss magazine. It was left of center magazine. And then in 1985, the Philippine Daily Inquirer opened. So again, you can see print media trying to rally the people. And then in 1986, Cardinal Sin used radio, the top Catholic official in the Philippines then, used radio to call on people to assemble along this highway. You can see that big crowd there. You can see it was actually Cardinal Sin who encouraged people to assemble there. And then once people had assembled there, another group used a radio station, DZRJ, to ask more people to come over because the government had controlled the radio station. So you can see it's print and radio at work in the People Power Revolution. In 1986, ABS-CBN reopened. This was among the organizations closed by President Marcos during martial law. And they had two broadcasts. In 1987, TV Patrol, and then you can see the guy here with a yellow box, eventually became Vice President of the Philippines. And at the same time, the English newscast, The World Tonight, was also launched by ABS-CBN, and the woman in the yellow box became a senator of the Philippines. So you can see how the press is able to catapult or to put people into positions of prominence such that they become elected in private office, all the way from Quezon, and then even ABS-CBN, its beginnings were owned by the brother of eventually a Philippine president. And the owner of one of the owners of ABS-CBN was the brother of the vice president of President Marcos. So it's all part of the elite. So in 1987, we had a new constitution. Yeah. So let me pause there. So from what I have mentioned, maybe I can get we can hear from some of you what struck you the most in terms of what I have said about Philippine history. Maybe we can pause a little bit and then hear from you what struck you the most about the role of media in Philippine history. Maybe you can hear, can raise your hand or maybe see, or you can type in the chat box and then I can acknowledge you. Maybe there. Maybe I stop my sharing first. Yan. Okay. So maybe you can, among the many items about Philippine history and media, what do you think made you most curious? Hello? Maybe I call some of you. Hello. Okay, so Renz Kevin Alcazar type, the power of the press to communicate change and incite revolution. Okay, so that's a good insight. No, the press communicates, mobilizes the people, helps mobilize the people in calling for change in society. What else? Okay, so maybe I continue.
Hello, sir.
Yes.
May I answer?
Yeah, sure.
Hi, sir. I'm Rachel from the Philippines, one of your students, and I want to bring up I want to note that it's important that in the Philippines, before we were colonized, women were thought leaders. Women were put into action. They were out doing things just as men would that would impact history. It's just so interesting how so much of women's powers and actions delineated when the Westerners came, and because they did impact our culture and the way we thought, then women started to become quiet, and the strength that we had in our local culture changed.
Yeah, actually, that for our friends who are not Filipinos, in the European languages, objects have gender, right? A table is woman, etc., etc. La mesa, for instance, in Spanish. But in our language, many things are gender free. Even the pronouns are gender free. So we don't have he, she, his, her. Everything is the pronouns are gender neutral. But because of again the colonialization, then there arise a more gendered way of looking at life, and the media also help reinforce this. Thank you. Other comments about the role of communication and media in Philippine history? Okay, so I'll continue. So now let's fast forward 34 years later. So essentially in 1987, we only had TV, radio, and print, or the mass media. But now, in 2021, we have internet and mobile media, and then various combinations. We have gaming, etc. But we have internet and mobile media. The classification used here in the Philippines. So now, what's the current Philippine media landscape? We are in the middle of the pandemic, and again, ABS-CBN that was reopened after that was closed by Marcos, reopened after EDSA, is closed again. Well, it's operating without the broadcast franchise, and I'll explain that later on. So its franchise ended last year, and it was not renewed. But how does the Philippine media look like now? TV is still, this is old data, okay? I'll explain later what's happening. But before the pandemic, before the closure of ABS-CBN, only two stations, ABS-CBN and GMA, had a significant group of viewers. So you can see between the two of them, 8 out of 10 Filipinos watched them. So 81% of all Filipinos watched either ABS-CBN or GMA. And Filipinos watch a lot of TV. So 81% of all of us watch TV, and 70% at least once a week. And TV is the most used and most trusted source of political information, which perhaps explains why, newscast anchors become very prominent politicians. So TV is, well, used to be king. Radio, again, is shared essentially by the two networks, DZMM from ABS-CBN and DZBB from GMA. So between the two of them, about almost half of Filipinos listen to them if Filipinos are listening to the radio. And then 65.6% of Filipinos listen to radio, and 41% listen to the radio at least once a week. Radio is the second most important tool for political information. And then for print, now, I discussed earlier how print was very important in early Philippine history, in revolutions especially. But now, you can see that very few people read newspapers or the physical newspapers. Very few, 1% to the biggest is 2%, and it is a tabloid, not a broadsheet. And see, less than 10% of Filipinos read every day, the newspaper every day, and less than 30% read a newspaper at least once a week. So hardly anyone reads newspapers anymore. The printed version anyway. So from being very dominant all the way up to 1986, the print market is dying. In comparison, look at the online news market in the Philippines. And we'll have more data about this later on. So again, it's ABS-CBN and GMA, the news portals of the biggest networks, respectively, are also the top providers of online news. And then I'll have more updated data about social media later on. So now we can see what's happening. Where are people now paying attention? Because print has lost its audience. So where are people spending their time? So again, you can see this is from 2015 to 2021. You can see, look at the active internet users. From 2015, 44%, now almost or 2/3 of Filipinos are active internet users. So from 44% to 67%. So there's a big rise in the number of active internet users. But look at the bigger jump. from social media, 40% to 81%. So double. So the number of social media accounts in the Philippines doubled in the last 6 years. Why? It's driven by social media accounts mobile. So very few people use the internet, which is the uh, traditional way of accessing the wired way of accessing the internet. But mobile connections, look at, there are more mobile connections than people in the Philippines, 138%. So some people have uh, more than one mobile gadget. And then 99% of Filipinos are active mobile social media users. So from 32%, 3 times over to 99% in 2021. So within 6 years, almost universal use of active mobile social media accounts. What happened in between? What do you think? What happened with Facebook especially? What did Facebook introduce in the Philippines to encourage Filipinos to open a social media account, especially Facebook? Maybe some of the Filipino students can uh, answer. What did Facebook do? Or what did Facebook experiment in the Philippines? Okay. Yeah, and that's free access to Facebook. So free data. Because before, people didn't have internet connection at home. And it was very expensive to get mobile data or to access the internet using your mobile phone. So what happened? Facebook partnered with the top mobile media company, Smart and Globe, and you could use Facebook for free. There are no pictures, but you can see the text. So essentially, Facebook was able to encourage Filipinos to use social media apps. And the rest, as they said, is history. So that was the main tool that was used to, the main strategy that was used to introduce social media. Okay, so I'll pause here. It's 2 o'clock. I was informed that we have wellness breaks every hour. So I'll pause here with the idea of online growth in the Philippines. And we'll have a 10-minute break. Okay, so we'll have a 10-minute break. Okay, so as I was saying earlier, the growth with media in the Philippines recently has been driven by mobile media. So it's mobile phones and so using social media apps. And you can see that even before the pandemic in 2020, 94% already had mobile phones, of which 93% are smartphones. There was even an increase in January 2021 to almost universal at 98.6%. And then many people still, over 10%, have non-smartphone mobile phone. So if you remember earlier, Filipinos, there were more mobile phones than Filipinos. And it's because people have two gadgets. So in this case, you can see that people have a smartphone plus one non-smartphone mobile phone. So they're keeping their older mobile phone gadgets. In comparison, 67% had a laptop or desktop computer in January 2020, slight change by 10% to January 2021. I suppose this is triggered in part by the shift to remote learning because right now we are not holding face-to-face classes. All classes in the Philippines are held virtually because of the pandemic. So it may be some time still before we return to the classroom. So people have invested on desktop computers. Tablet devices have gone down because probably not as useful in online classes or for work. And then how about streaming TV content? Still not going as fast as imagined. It says here, the device for streaming TV content over the internet is 10% only. Gaming is 14%. Smart home device is almost 5%. So you can see that the other gadgets are not getting as much traction, are not really as popular as other devices. People are still sticking in general to mobile phones and essentially smartphones and traditional laptop or desktop computers. But now look at how people are spending their time. You can see this is every day, using the internet 11 hours. So maybe I can hear from some of you later on, how much time do you spend in these different gadgets? So you can see on the average, Filipinos say they use the internet for 11 hours, almost half the day, no? They used to watch, well, they watch TV, broadcast and streaming, 3.5 hours. And then they use social media for over 4 hours. And then they read, oh, it should only be 1 hour. Sorry, there's a typo. It should be 1 hour and 12 minutes reading press media. So you can see the print really has gone down. The readership, it's 1 hour, 12 minutes. Sorry for the typo. And then listening to music and streaming devices, 2 hours. Listening to broadcast radio, not so much. Podcast, not so much. Playing video games, 1.5 hours. But you can see the immersion of people in the internet, 11 hours, using social media and watching TV, broadcast, and streaming. So maybe I can hear from you. I'll pause here and then ask how much similar or different is your use of media every day. Maybe I can ask, so do you use the media as much, the internet as much, 11 hours per day, you think, or more? Maybe you can, for those of you who are in Taiwan, maybe you can raise your hand, and then if you use the internet for more than 11 hours per day. Yeah, you raise your hand if you use the internet. Everyone, all of you, I can see you on screen. You can raise your hand if you use the internet for more than 11 hours per day. No? Okay. How much? Maybe you can do sign language. How many hours do you use the internet there per day? Okay, 9 hours. How about the others? You can use the mic in front of you. I think you can hear you if you use the mic. How many hours do you use the internet? 6 to 7. So it's like office. Okay. I have some comments here. So it's difficult to quantify number of hours for online media access. It's like quantifying how many hours do you use electricity per day. So something like that. Okay, so you don't, you're not the one, do you use the internet, do you use your mobile phone to wake you up? Okay, so that's one already. Actually, the moment you use your cell phone, it signals to your device that you are awake. When you use the alarm clock and then you snooze it, it already signals to the rest of the apps that you are awake. It's a system of alerting the other apps. Okay, so I'm surprised you're not there 24 hours in the internet. Okay, so this is the system in the Philippines. A lot, 11 hours in the internet. So what do the people visit? This is, let me see if I can zoom. No, I cannot zoom. Hey, wait. Uh, so I'll just read it here. Google, number 1, 2, Facebook, 3, YouTube, 4th, Wikipedia, and then look at number 5, Pornhub. Those of you not familiar, that's a pornography site. And every year there's this annual survey and it says that Filipinos are among the top visitors of that porn site. And then there's Yahoo, Twitter, Lazada, Google.com.ph. But you can see it's really a lot of search engines, social media apps. And then Lazada made it to number 9. I suppose this is January 2021 data. The Philippines was on lockdown. And so e-commerce really made a big headway in Philippine markets last year because people were forced to buy online because the shopping malls were closed. Okay, you can see the rest, fandom.com, Instagram, Shopee, another another shopping website, Reddit, okay, what's that? Oh, another porn site, I suppose. So it's a lot of social media and search engines are being used. And then in terms of traffic share by device, age, and gender. So these are all from We Are Social. I'm concerned over the difference between male and female, where male are using a particular app more than females. So you can see that across the board, more men are using, a bigger percentage of men are using various websites more than do women. So for instance, more men, 57% compared to 42% of women use Google. The same with Facebook, 52% men compared to 47.5 women. Generally more equal compared to Google, but still more men. YouTube, again, more men. Wikipedia, more men. But look at the porn site. Porn site, 57% men, only 13% women. Is the men who are using it. But even the shopping, 56% men and 44% women. So in terms of the use of media, of the apps, the website, it's more male majority. How about in terms of age groups? It's the age interval between age 25 to 34. See, it's almost a third of them use the websites compared to the other generations. But surprisingly, even what we call the senior citizens, the age 65 and over, there's already a group of between 6% to 10% or more, there's a group which is using these websites. So even the older demographic is now using websites here in the Philippines, though around 10% only. How about the social media behavior? Again, from We Are Social, it says 100% visited or used a social network or a messaging service in the past month. 93% actively engaged with or contributed to social media in the past month. So there's a 5% difference. So more people, or actually more, 6%, 7%, almost 7% difference. People visit, but they don't contribute. So lurkers, essentially. So 100% are lurkers, and then 93% do posting. And then in social media, this is a lot, 4 hours and 15 minutes. So what's happening now in terms of media convergence? People are using social media while watching content. So there is this phenomenon of multiple screen viewing. So right now, for instance, we have this laptop, you're listening to me, but at the same time, you have your mobile phone, maybe you're engaging in social media activity. So that's multiple screen behavior. And Filipinos are noted for multiple screen uses. So doing using social media while watching TV or engaging in some school or office work. Because there are only 24 hours in a day, people still sleep, say 6 hours. So there's really just 18 hours per day. And then if you think about it, and then people use the internet for 4 hours, social media for 4 hours, watch for 4 hours, and then they add up. So you can see that there's a lot of overlap in terms of media use. But you can see also number of accounts. Average number of social media accounts per internet users, 10. So there's a lot of accounts, maybe one Instagram, one Twitter, one Facebook, maybe one Facebook, one YouTube, and a couple of channels. So there's a lot of social media accounts. And there is such a thing also as troll armies, and I'll explain later, or trolls, we call them. And finally, 58% of internet users use social media for work purposes. I'm sure this is significantly higher from the year before because the pandemic has forced many of us to work from home. So how about social media platforms? Okay, so percentage of internet users that has used each platform in the past month. So YouTube is 97%. It has overtaken Facebook, 97%. And then Facebook Messenger at 92%, Instagram at 73%. What do you think is happening here? Why? Because for the longest time, Facebook was the top or the most widely used social media platform in the Philippines. How come Facebook has been able to overtake, YouTube has been able to overtake Facebook? Maybe some of the Filipinos here can guess why suddenly YouTube, even marginally, overtaken Facebook, because before it's always been Facebook as the top social media platform. Maybe some of the Filipinos can guess. I can explain to our yes. Who raised your hand? Let me see. Reman, RMR Reman.
Hello. I think it's because of the rise of vloggers in the Philippines, the celebrification of the ordinary, and that's why a lot of Filipinos are watching YouTube videos because they tend to relate to those vloggers. That's why there is a significant increase in engagement in YouTube.
Okay, so there's a lot of vloggers, what we call vloggers. So there's a lot of YouTube content creators in the Philippines now, and they get depending upon your interest, then there are influencers you probably want to follow in YouTube. So in that case, YouTube has been successful in encouraging locals to produce content and develop their own audiences. So that's one. How about another reason? Anyone want to hazard a guess? To guess what's the main thing that happened in terms of media in the Philippines in the last year? Okay, Torres.
Yes, sir, it's Rachel.
Yes, Rachel, hi.
Yes, I would like to think that there's a shift in what on the type of media people consume. So I assume that from television and people were relying on satellite TV. So now I guess when they saw the opportunity of content on demand, like on YouTube, where there is sometimes even broadcasting stations like ABS, CBN, and GMA, they have their content put on YouTube, so they get to watch it on their own time. So I guess that opportunity enticed more audiences to go for YouTube because there are more opportunities, there's more content, more variation.
Okay, so changing lifestyle. Because with traditional TV, you are dependent on the schedule of the TV, of the network itself. So you have to be at exactly the right time to be able to watch a broadcast content, right? If you want to see something happening on TV, you have to be there at the right time because it won't be replayed again. But for YouTube, everything is on demand. So you can just watch at your own pace, at your own time. Okay, so that's good too. What else? What else happened? That it really made people look at YouTube as a viable platform for watching uh, audio-visual content. I go back to my slides. Here, the closure of the network, the non-renewal of the franchise of ABS-CBN. So ABS-CBN, as you can see here, is a top 41% of Filipinos watch it. Okay, so it has the most popular television shows in the Philippines, and without the franchise, it could no longer broadcast nationally in public frequency. So what happened? They shifted their more popular shows online in YouTube. So TV Patrol, the main primetime newscast, was among the first to move from broadcast to YouTube, to internet. And so people, even older citizens who were not familiar with YouTube, had to ask their younger relatives to operate YouTube, to open YouTube, so that they could watch the live news in the early evening, in the prime time, evening prime time. So yeah, so that's what happened. And then now, for instance, still the main noontime variety shows from Monday to Sunday are shown on YouTube. So you can watch what was shown before on broadcast now online. So ABS-CBN is always live online in YouTube. So in essence, the non-renewal of the broadcast franchise resulted in a shift to the online platform, specifically YouTube. Okay. Ayan. So let's look at the apps by category. There's the Messenger, which is top, social networking apps, 98%, entertainment and video apps, 93%, music, 68%, game apps. Shopping apps was really the breakthrough, were really the breakthrough app this year at 86%. Maps. Oh, this is important. Look at banking and financial services, 42%. Remember that figure. Uh, and then, oh, dating and friendship apps, 12%. So this is the use of mobile apps by category. But in terms of action, so you can see, go back. Banking and financial services, 42% use the app, but only 30% use a mobile payment service. So there's still a bridge to be crossed, in terms of the number of people who use the banking and financial services apps, 42%, still not a majority. But even a bigger challenge is making them pay using their mobile gadgets. So there's still fear of using uh, online payment schemes and use mobile phone as a ticket or boarding pass 11%. So what's happening? People still fear that their money may be lost virtually. And it doesn't help when people hear various security breaches in mobile phone finance apps. Okay. And now, how about emergence of new platforms? Over a third of the population use over-the-top media services. So, what are over-the-top media services? These are uh, Netflix, Disney Plus, HBO, and the like. So these are over iFlix. These are over-the-top media services. So over a third use over-the-top mid streaming services. So still quite small, not a majority. But those fewer, relatively smaller group compared to Facebook users, compared to YouTube users, they stream 2 billion hours of over-the-top media services per month and is the second highest among 6 markets surveyed and only second to Indonesia. So 55% of OTT viewers are young. So this is the main demographic for advertisers. And then among 25 to 34 years old, almost a majority, 59%, report watching Korean programming. So maybe I ask you here with me today, how many of you, if you raise your hand, how many are watching Korean content? No? Wow. In the Philippines, it's such a big deal. So what are you watching? Maybe I can ask you. What do you watch? Because here, everything like Netflix, if you look at the Netflix list here of the top shows, it's always some Korean product. So from Crash Landing Into You, now it's Vincenzo. So all of these Korean shows. So what do people, what do you watch? Maybe just ask you personally. Maybe you can use the mic or just say it loudly. What do you watch in your over-the-top media apps?
Crash landing on you.
That's Korean. Yes.
I watch Japanese program and also some series from the States.
Okay. Thank you. So what about what series in the US? Maybe I ask you again. What series in the US?
Oh, it's called The New Amsterdam. It's about
the New Amsterdam. Yeah, I know of New Amsterdam. Okay, that's quite popular.
Yeah, like a while ago, but it stopped. I think the last series is called The Pandemic, and they decided to cancel cancel the release because of the situation now in the world. They don't want to panic people.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. How about the others there? What do you watch?
Hi.
Yes.
As you mentioned, a Crash Landing on You. I actually watched that, but that's probably the only Korean show I watched lately. And usually I watch films because I think TV series cause a lot of time devotion. Yeah, you need to develop a lot of time. So usually I watch film instead.
Yeah, I'm the same with you. I do not start watching Korean series or any series for that matter because it takes so long. I don't have the time to to binge watch a show, right? It takes too long. What I've noticed actually is I watch a lot of YouTube videos because they are shorter and demand less of my time. Okay, thank you. So Crash Landing on You was popular there, but not others. Here, I think everything they watch. Now it's Vincenzo, which is the most popular. How about you, the third? You want to share?
I watched the UK series like The Crown. Ever heard of
Mm.
it? Yeah, I very like this series. I watched it. Now it's the season 4, I think.
Yeah, that's the only. I said earlier I don't really watch series, but that's the only series I watched, The Crown,
Yay!
from beginning to end.
Yeah,
Uh,
I very like it.
yeah, well, at least that's my. I'm familiar with the characters. So I grew up with some of them. So from Princess Diana, etc. So I was a kid when they were married, and it was very well made.
And but
Thank you.
most
Yes,
of the time I watch YouTube.
yeah, I watch YouTube too because it's only 15 minutes and then I'm done
Yeah.
with a couple of several episodes. Thank you. But in the Philippines, we see a lot of people watch series. That's why they spend so much time in YouTube or in these over-the-top media services. Okay. Let me see if any raise hands. Uh, oh, okay. One reason John Pansaran said that YouTube also gained some audience members because it is being used as a source of educational materials, especially useful in the context of remote learning. So cartoon programs because of my son. Okay, and then 55% back to the Philippines of over-the-top media services of viewers have increased streaming during COVID. So 55% increased their use of Netflix, especially in the Philippines, and 65% plan to maintain or increase their consumption even after the pandemic. And now there's replacement. So before, what was happening when I wrote the paper, I asked you to read earlier, before, as I said, there's multiple screen viewing. So between the cell phone or the gadget and the main TV set. But now we are seeing a bigger group, in this case, 22% have not watched 22% of users have not watched traditional TV at all in the 3 months prior to the survey, second only to Malaysia, 23%. So people are starting to let go of traditional TV, especially for this is something that we have not expected before, that people would give up the traditional TV, but it's happening. And then the Philippines is the most ad tolerant Southeast Asian country, with 42% willing to watch 4 or more advertisements per hour of free content. I've noticed this. YouTube now has a lot of commercials. It's becoming like mainstream TV. But if you're used to mainstream TV, then it shouldn't be a problem. And then advertisers can reach more than 20 million consumers in the Philippines on ad-supported platforms. So still a sizable crowd, even if it is only uh, a fifth of all Filipinos. Okay, now some highlights. Over the top is disrupting TV prime time. So prime time, as you know, because you're communication media students, is the most expensive and most profitable time for media, especially the block from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. in the Philippines. And you can see that uh, from 8 p.m. to midnight, around half of Filipinos are watching over-the-top services now, which means this is half the audience that would have otherwise watched the broadcast television. So we are really seeing a shift from the broadcast TV from the traditional TV to over-the-top services. We'll see, because right now the situation is quite different when the biggest network, which commands half of Filipino audiences, is not broadcasting. So ABS-CBN, if you recall earlier, ABS-CBN accounted for about 40% of broadcast TV audience. Now, without ABS-CBN airing on its own frequency, now it's airing on some other broadcasting company's frequency, which doesn't have as strong a reach as ABS-CBN's old system. Things are a little bit different. We'll see whether ABS-CBN will still have the chance to have a franchise later on, and should it be able to go back to broadcasting, whether it will bring down the numbers again for over-the-top services. Again, let me explain that. ABS-CBN was the biggest broadcasting company in the Philippines, and it commanded somewhere between 40% to 50% of audiences in prime time every night. But now, its own broadcasting center is closed. Instead, ABS-CBN is broadcasting its shows through other networks, partner networks, which don't have as strong a reach as ABS-CBN. So that's a situation now. So maybe that's one reason why people are spending more time in over-the-top services, because they cannot access ABS-CBN the way they used to when ABS-CBN transmitted from its own infrastructure. Now we will see if ABS-CBN, the big network, is able to get a franchise again and start using its own transmission facilities. Whether that will change or arrest or decrease the rise in OTT viewership. Maybe if ABS-CBN returns on the air, we will not see a sharp increase in the viewership of over-the-top services. Alternatively, it can happen too that people are used already to watching using OTT, which means that the old broadcast model is really going to die eventually. And you can see that people are getting more, as I said in the earlier slide, accepting of advertisements in over-the-top services, which means that advertisers will be enticed, will be encouraged to show their products, their advertisements in over-the-top platforms. Because before, they are just used to showing this on free or broadcast TV. Okay. So that's it. That's the current Philippine media landscape. So I use from the historical perspective earlier in the first part. Now we are in the second part, in the Philippine media landscape. So right now, so maybe let's discuss, especially with you in Taiwan, maybe you can enlighten us Filipinos here, how does it look like in your own country? And someone is from Malaysia too, right? Maybe you can explain how would you describe or how would you compare what's happening in your country to the Philippines? So in summary, in the Philippines, we are seeing a shift from traditional media, from physical print newspapers, which are now dead, or dying to online news. We're also seeing some shift from broadcast or free TV to over-the-top services. We're also seeing a shift into YouTube and other on-demand services. And from my own research, the trajectory or the speed is faster than expected. And part of this is due to the pandemic because one, people are at home and are using their gadgets more for work, for school, for entertainment. And secondly, the closure of the top network, which is making people shift to other services now that they cannot probably access where ABS-CBN shows are now being transmitted. So maybe you can describe to us what's happening there or your feelings about what's happening there uh, in your country. Should I pause? Yeah. So maybe you can share. Yes. Yes.
From Taiwan, I think from the view of the providers, they still provide the traditional content like from TV or broadcast. However, they do upload their materials onto platforms like YouTube and like Spotify, like places for podcasts as well. And then uh, if we come to the audience, I think we now we use like YouTube to watch news on TV anymore, but we still see those clips on YouTube, but they look exactly the same from what's in the TV.
Also, it's not live. It's not shown live. Okay.
The fastest is still like newspaper and then TV news, but however after like hours or days we can see it on YouTube as well. So like YouTube is a faster or more convenient way to access. However, the information is not actually that new. So I think it's like a bit contradicting. It's fun.
Yeah. Okay, so that was the system before. For instance, that was a system for the big network before. So they would air on free TV and then later on upload in YouTube. But because now they don't have the franchise to broadcast on their own transmitter, now they are broadcast well streaming live. And so that was a product of political development. Otherwise, I don't think ABS-CBN would have changed its system if it still had the franchise. So it probably we would still have the same model as yours. Yeah.
In Taiwan, like sometimes if I do watch TV, the anchor will tell the audience to make sure you follow our YouTube channel like that. So I think they try to make the audience look at their content on both ways.
Yeah, that was the same before like, follow, subscribe, they would say. But now they're doing it also live. Because before, right, at the end of the show, they would say, oh, you can watch clips of the newscast in YouTube, and then they would delete and they would not archive. But now it's there in YouTube. Oh, and then one thing I wrote about in the paper I asked you to read is also the movies. Way back in 2018, uh, Netflix did not have local or Philippine movies. But now, ABS-CBN uploads its movies in Netflix. So again, it's a business decision because there's audience. Before, ABS-CBN wanted people to use its own app, and so it wouldn't share its movies in Netflix or similar apps because ABS-CBN wanted its own app. But now, seeing that there's business sense to upload also content in uh, Netflix, then they're doing it. But we don't know the answers yet. But what they are doing is they're trying to sell the movies first on their platform. So for instance, there's a new movie they have produced, they'll upload in their platform and then people would pay for the movie. But I've noticed that maybe 2 3 months later, the same movie would be in Netflix. So there's dual income, right? Now my concern is if I already bought the movie and I saw it and I see it now in Netflix, maybe I will not buy anymore from the network app. Instead, I will just wait for the movie to appear in Netflix where it will be part of what I already pay for. So do you have the same system in Taiwan for that?
I think we do. Right? We do have like local. I think it's called TTS.
Yeah.
TTS and 7 Plus.
Yeah,
hours.
they try to.
Yeah.
But I don't think that it works.
Like,
So what do they do? Yeah.
do you want to? Lorna wants to share.
Okay. Yes. Good.
I'll give it to Lorna. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think we have public TV PTS, and they're trying to develop their own OTT. However, I think it's not really successful, and instead it kind of have a cooperate production. They co-production with OTT instead, and I think they still have the ability to create quality content. However, the distribution channel is gradually fading away. So I think, yeah.
So they're trying to find new distribution channels but are not being very successful.
Yes, so I think they now invest a lot in producing quality content and try to cooperate with whether it's local or international OTT.
Yeah, but how about one of the concerns here is payment. How is payment, mobile payment facilities in Taiwan? Are people open to mobile payment facilities?
People still use Netflix more, right?
Uh, do you mean paying for the apps?
No, using the gadget to pay because Filipinos are still not very open to
Oh,
paying using the gadget.
I think a lot of people start using Line Pay, but and it's very a lot of places afford that, but takes Line Pay. However, it's not very. It's kind of
Not so
it's
popular.
not really popular. We cannot say it's as popular. I think compared to China, we're definitely not there yet, but it's getting more popular among young people.
Is LifePay connected to a bank or really a standalone app?
Oh, it's contact to an app. It's online. We have the social. It's kind of a social media app. It's online and it has a lot of function, including Line TV. It's also
Ah,
yeah, and the Line Pay. And I think it's the most used app for instant messages in Taiwan.
okay. Because for us, the banks have not been successful in really getting a lot of users to use their apps. But instead, the most popular payment system now is something called GCash, which is a combination of app and physical uh, kiosks where you deposit money and then it goes to your cell phone and then you use it to uh, pay various services. So you can connect it to your bank account, but many people use it uh, as a standalone service. and then deposit money to it using a kiosk, etc. So that's what people use now because it takes a lot of requirements to open a bank account here and then to use the app, etc. So that's the challenge now, paying for mobile services.
I can. I think
Yeah.
I have something to share. I think in Taiwan we put some money in the account, but not our bank account. Like we have another account in the app, so it is not directly linked to your bank account. So maybe that's like a bit. People are not so concerned because it's not directly connected.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
then
So.
and also lately we have I think it's called Autumn Point. It's a very the dominant convenience store 7-Eleven in Taiwan, and because it is bought by Tongyi, like a very big company, and they try to uh, develop their own app, and from that they will give I think it's points, and you can use it like and then so the company do this to encourage people to pay with their phone instead of real money.
Yeah, we have one like that, which was very popular in the beginning, but didn't really. Maybe one of the students can remind me of the name. Leica Gems. They call them Leica Gems. So you use gems, you get rewards in terms of gems, and then you can use the gems to pay for things like the stone, right? The gem. But what you said earlier, people are not comfortable linking their bank account to the payment facility. I think people are concerned that the payment facility will get corrupted and then it will get all of their money and their money will disappear. That's still the concern that people have. That's why there's this intermediary or second level app for payment, which is not connected to the bank account.
I think in that way it will be more uh, not so concerning like as a user because I also feel the same way.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you very much. We've reached 3 o'clock. So again, going to take our 10-minute wellness break. So we'll be back by 3:10. Okay. So see you at 3:10. Okay. For the third hour of our lecture today, for discussion today, we're going to talk about media ownership and some important issues in Philippine media right now. So who owns Philippine media and what are the implications of ownership uh, to how things are being used and operated in the Philippines? So again, because media is specially protected in the Constitution, I'll go back to 1987 with our Constitution. And it states that the ownership and management of mass media shall be limited to citizens of the Philippines or to corporations, cooperatives, or associations wholly owned and managed by such citizens. The Congress shall regulate or prohibit monopolies in commercial mass media when the public interest so requires. No combinations in restraint of trade or unfair competition therein shall be allowed. So what does this mean? It means only Filipinos can own a mass media organization. But remember, this was 1987, and mass media was only print, radio, and TV. And then the advertising industry has a special mention too in the Constitution, one of the very few industries mentioned in it. The advertising industry is impressed with public interest and shall be regulated by law for the protection of consumers and the promotion of the general welfare. Only Filipino citizens or corporations or associations at least 70% of the capital, which is owned by such citizens, shall be allowed to engage in the advertising industry. And the participation of foreign investors in the governing body of entities in such industry shall be limited to the proportionate share in the capital thereof, etc. So you can see, because of the special importance placed on media, one, only Filipinos are allowed to own a mass media organization, and the advertising industry has to be, our advertising agency needs to have at least 70% Filipino ownership. So because of this provision, and remember again, 1987, a lot of the media organizations were closed before and had to be restructured in the new government in the 1987 post-people power period. So now you can see we have 110 million Filipinos, and the media organizations are owned by very few. So you have how many here? 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 24, something, wait, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 23 organizations essentially own or operate the Philippine mass media industry. While there are 23 of them, only two matter, ABS-CBN and GMA, which are the biggest networks. And then between these two companies are these three owners. So in green, the Lopez family owns ABS-CBN. In red are the owners of GMA network, the second biggest. So that's the Gozon, Jimenez, and Duwavit families. And then third, Manny Pangilinan essentially controls the shares for the third biggest network and also some shares in other businesses, media businesses. But see, you have 18, you have these families really controlling the mass media. And in terms of revenue, ABS and GMA really have the lion's share at almost 80%. So 80% of the revenue in the traditional media new media companies go to them. So ABS and GMA. Manila Bulletin and Philippine Star and Inquirer 3, 4, and 5 are print organizations, and we already know from earlier that the print industry is not faring very well. Number 6 is Channel 5, the network owned by Manny Pangilinan. I'll explain later. And then Solar Entertainment, essentially is a production company with media outlets. And then Manila Broadcasting Company is radio. So you can see here, one industry, 15 families, and a lot of them, sorry for the change in font, a lot of them own several, or one of each, one TV, one radio, one print, one online. This is from the Media Ownership Monitor website. Let's look at ABS-CBN, which is a multimedia company. It has TV, radio, online, and print. And look at how many TV stations it has, how many radio stations it has, and then also some print magazines. Before, it was understood that you'd only have one station, one TV station, one radio station, one of each. But now now ABS-CBN has 39 VHF TV stations, so it has one frequency. So an interpretation of the law, rather than one of each, is one frequency, and then you can split it. So that is been argued before the courts now. And then ABS-CBN is a multimedia company, and you can see it as media networks, digital interactive media, as cable, it has consumer products and services. this is not still exhaustive, and a number of also have closed, like Kidzania has closed because of the pandemic. GMA network also has the same. So it has 47 VHF TV stations and 41 UHF TV stations, 19 FM radio stations and 4 AM radio stations, and so on and so forth. Now, Manny Pangilinan, I cannot zoom this, but you can see that he owns various shares of stock that he controls through Hazing Holdings, networks, etc., etc. So while he has no really majority share in the companies, you can see 25% here, 28% there, 16, 17% there. It's only in NBC, which is 51% owned by them, but the rest, they have shares of stock. So that's mass media. That's Filipino owned. Now, in 1998, the Department of Justice offered its own opinion. And the rationale is internet business. The internet access provided merely serves as a carrier for transmitting messages. It does not create the messages or information, nor transmit messages. So essentially what it says here, online and cable news media as telecommunication firms considered as public utilities which have corresponding regulations. So again, internet companies are not considered as mass media companies because in the earlier understanding, internet companies are like public utilities which just transmit services but do not produce their own content. That's why they can be owned by only 60% of Filipino citizens, with 40% being foreign equity. So what does it mean now for companies like Rappler? Rappler has gotten the attention of the government for supposedly being anti-establishment. But now, how do we classify it? Is it an internet company or a mass media company? Because a mass media company produces news like ABS-CBN, like GMA7. However, well, it is true that Rappler produces content. There's also a question of whether it is a mass media company because it does not operate in print, radio, and TV. It operates purely online. So you can see now there's confusion because the main distinction was mass media companies produce and transmit content, whereas internet companies only transmit content. The thing is, Rappler doesn't have frequency, or argues that it is only an internet company basis on online medium outlet. So there's where a lot of the confusion is happening right now, and a lot of the cases are being discussed. And it does not only apply to Rappler, because GMA and ABS-CBN also have now shares of stock because of this gray area, foreign shares of stock because of this gray area between what is a mass media company and an internet company. Okay, so now this is just for bookmarking, but think about how the emergence of new media platforms impact upon the media ownership structure. So again, let me rewind. No, before it's ABS-CBN and GMA, which essentially control what is called a duopoly, or a monopoly with two organizations, a duopoly. So ABS-CBN and GMA maintain a duopoly in Philippine media. Now, with new platforms, outside of the traditional radio, print, and TV, do you think that the situation will change? So something to think about later on. I'll continue, and then later we will discuss how the ownership and the emergence of new platforms may relate to society. I'll discuss the issue of press freedom, because remember when I started today's lecture, we talked about the fight for freedom in the Philippines and the role of media in it. So this is from the Reporters Without Borders, an international organization that advocates for press freedom, Reporters Sans Frontiers. So when sworn in as president in June 2016, the president issued a cryptic but grim warning. Just because you're a journalist, you are not exempted from assassination if you're, pardon the curse, and then freedom of expression cannot help you if you have done something wrong. And then, of course, this is Rappler, and as I've said earlier, it's antagonistic of the government. But you can see the quotation on the left is from RSF, and it says that there are the RSF, the international organization, lists 5 items, which says these items are illustrative, or these 5 items demonstrate how the current administration is problematic in terms of press freedom. So number 1 is the targeting of Rappler, which, as I said, is contentious of the government. So here you have the list of cases filed by various entities against Maria Ressa. It is not clear whether this is government instigated, but the reality is there are a lot of cases against Rappler. So various cyber libel cases, various cases against securities or ownership issues, etc. So again, Rappler, as using a new platform, is in the gray area between a mass media company and an online company. In this 1998 opinion of the Department of Justice, internet businesses were just seen as internet service providers, or ISPs, essentially a telephone company. But things have since changed, no? And that policy is very old now. It's 1 generation old. The second, according to RSF, pertains to media killings. So media killings are a real concern in the Philippines. So 4 Filipino journalists were killed in 2020, probably by thugs working for local politicians who can have reporters silenced with complete immunity. After a 10-year wait, several leading members of a big political clan in southern Philippines were finally convicted of the biggest ever massacre of journalists. So that was in 2009. So this is a map from RSF, and says that our ranking in the World Press Freedom Index has gone down from 136 to 138, and our global score has increased slightly from 2013. But you can see media killings are a problem. This is from the Center for Media Freedom and Responsibility, and this is not the media killings are not peculiar to the Duterte administration, to the current administration, but historically, there have been media killings across government. So from the Aquino administration, 21 from 1986 to 1982, and then 11 in the following administration, so on and so forth. A total of 152 all the way to May 30, 2016. And the problem is across the Philippines, from Metro Manila and Luzon, the biggest island, 66 reported cases between 2016 and 2018. The Visayas has 12, Mindanao has 21. So the cases are in terms of killing, intimidation, arrest, attacks in the website, physical assault, burning of facilities, among others. So this is between January 1, 2019 to April 30, 2020. So again, first was Rappler, second is the media killings. Third, according to RSF, the third case against the current administration in terms of its engagement of media is the non-renewal of ABS-CBN franchise. Again, the legislature, the Philippine Congress, which supports the president and for the most part, refused to renew the franchise. And then the social weather stations, a public survey company, public opinion survey company, released these findings around the time ABS-CBN was closed almost a year, more than a year ago, early May 2020. So ABS-CBN was closed May 2020, and then the survey was conducted in July 3 to 6, 2020, and majority of Filipinos strongly agree that Congress should renew the franchise so that it can broadcast its programs again, and another 19% somewhat agree. And then the second row, 56% combined strongly agree and somewhat agree that Congress non-renewal is a major blow to press freedom. Okay, and then the fourth, the troll armies. The persecution of media has been accompanied by online harassment campaigns orchestrated by pro-Duterte troll armies. Again, this is from RSF, which also launched cyber attacks on alternative news websites and the site of the National National Union of Journalists of the Philippines in order to block them. So this scholar, Jonathan Ong, says that in the Philippines, there's a system for network disinformation campaigns. So essentially, their argument is, based on their research, that there's an explicit campaign where the client dictates campaign objectives, and then an army is mobilized of troll commenters who then, whether use positive reinforcement techniques to create a brand for the client, or diverse from an issue, or to launch an attack against a competitor, or to confuse the issue. So they said that if there's a problem that's being faced, then a campaign is launched using an army that will then employ these four tactics. First, to reinforce the positive image of the client, or to create a diversion, or to attack the opponent, or to confuse the issue. So there's that troll army. And then there's red tagging. In the Philippines, there's a communist insurgency movement, but there's also a Communist Party, which is legal. But there's still fear of communism. So there's this red tagging, as it says here, a hangover from Cold War, and before that, when the country was a US colony, which is typically a Philippine practice under which dissident individuals or groups are identified to the police and paramilitaries as legitimate targets for arbitrary arrest or summary execution. So they said that there's a system ongoing right now, like this. Okay. So we have media ownership, which is controlled by a very few organizations and individuals. We already discussed this in the beginning. However, there's also emergent media. And this emergent media have policy implications. So the media platforms are diversifying. There are more media platforms now. in the Philippines. But we can see to some extent that ownership still is limited to a few. But now we have the press under attack, supposedly according to RSF. Do you think what may happen with the media being controlled by a smaller group, which now has more platforms under their disposal, and then this press being attacked? So it's a bit, it's a difficult question, but maybe we can slowly discuss. Okay, let me walk you through again the we'll spend some time on this topic. Okay, so let's discuss. Okay, let's discuss the topic, this one. So let me summarize. Media ownership in the Philippines is controlled by a select few, 15 families or organizations, but still beyond these two families, or between these 15 or so organizations, you have really two which matter, ABS-CBN and GMA. So ownership is concentrated in the elite, especially when it is two. Things were, are things supposed to change because of newer platforms? Whether because of the newer platforms, the media will become more independent or less controlled by this elite. So maybe I pause there and I ask you maybe, how is the system in Taiwan? What does the media ownership look like there? You mentioned earlier about the government platform, which is trying to produce content. But how does it look like there? In the Philippines, it's a very capitalist model. And it's constitutionally protected to be Filipino-owned. So what happened, without foreign revenues, it's really this very small elite, especially two organizations which are controlling Philippine media. Is it the same in Taiwan? Is there, I mean, you can just, from your observations.
Um, I think traditionally there are three channels. Right?
Oh,
Yes.
long time ago,
Yeah,
we have the martial law.
Yeah, and there's the three channels. That is, I think it's even beyond terrestrial TV.
Yeah, terrestrial TV, yeah.
And I think there are three channels, but I think right now there are several channels that start to also gain a lot of views, like TVBS. And the recent, Zhongtian is recently taken down because of some issue, but it used to be really popular as well. So don't, uh, I don't think the concentration here is as serious as in the Philippines, but I think still there are uh, in few hands. Like in, I think Apple TV or other small sectors, they do not have views and even they face more challenges in the digital age. And you mentioned Zhonghua Telecom. They provide an MOD service, but they do not have their own channel because I think the concentration law or the antitrust law will prohibit them to enter the content production.
Oh, so you have antitrust law. It's the same here. Supposedly, we have the Philippine Competition Commission.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so, but I heard some professor think that if Zhonghua Telecom, the one who has the set-top box, provides set-top box, if they are allowed to enter the content production, it will be beneficial for the TV industry to merge together and to try to adapt to the streaming industry. But right now it cannot.
Okay, but that network has been able to uh, create its own market outside of terrestrial TV.
Uh,
Oh,
uh,
the new company has been able to create a market outside of the traditional.
Yes, but they cannot produce content, so they have to purchase content from traditional right now because they are prohibited to have their own content.
I see. Okay. So essentially, where do they get their content?
Uh,
It's kind of like Netflix.
yeah, it's kind of like Netflix, but it's not streaming. It's set-top box. It's
Mhm.
from the LAN network. Yeah, it's not.
Yeah, so we have the same. We have the same system of set up boxes. But you know what happened? The popular ones are still ABS-CBN and GMA. So the two.
They have their own set-top box, or they just have their channels on the.
No, they have their own set-top box too.
Oh,
So do families buy both of them or just one of them?
Well, now what's happened is ABS-CBN launched theirs first. So people bought the ABS-CBN set-top box. It's called Digibox. And then now GMA launched its own, but still they share the same content.
oh. I think Taiwan doesn't the traditional the channels that is traditionally concentrated. It's not. They don't have their own set-top box, so it's
Oh,
separated. I think right
oh,
now it's
you know why they have the set-top box? Because there's a law in the Philippines that all TV sets should be digital, should be digitally transmitted. But Filipinos are not that affluent, so people cannot buy digital TV immediately. So what happens is the Digibox essentially converts the digital signal for analog television sets too. So even if you have an old television set, you can still get a digital transmission.
that's very interesting.
Right? And then they added some new television channels, etc., for the Digibox as incentive. And as it killed the cable companies. Well, because see, in the Philippines, one problem is transmission because we are islands and the islands have mountains. So even if you build a tall transmitter, sometimes the signal won't be clear because there are mountains in between. So this is one solution is to have a digibox so that your signal will be clearer. Before, you would need a cable subscription to get a clear signal in the province for the terrestrial TV. So it's so weird, right? You get cable TV to get clear signal for terrestrial transmission.
um, so is the channel of the broadcast channel also has the control over the cable service or the infrastructure in Philippines?
Yes. ABS-CBN also has Sky Cable.
I think because in Taiwan it's separated. In Taiwan, only Zhonghua Telecom, the one I mentioned with the set-top box, and the other is Kaifu. I think they are the two majors that control the cable infrastructure, and it's separated from the content channel.
Like in Taiwan, it's like layers and layers. They're all different owners. Like yeah, but it seems like in Philippines, it's like all in one. It's a vertical.
Yeah, but see, the Constitution tried to prevent it. This vertical, the Constitution tried to prevent it. But, corporations have a way of going around the principle. So before it was very clear, one of each. But they said, oh, it's one frequency, but if we can split the frequency into several. So it's like a big pipe, right? The frequency is a big pipe. Before it would transmit one television uh, network. But now they are able to transmit because they said technology has advanced that they can use the same frequency to transmit several stations. So it's a different system.
Yeah, a little bit different.
So before, when they said one frequency, one station, but with technology, it's one frequency, many stations. See, that's why uh, because technology, media are converging, diversifying faster than the policy. And then you have this definition of the internet business as being very old school, where internet business is just the internet service provider. I think that's essentially what's happened with that company. How do you say it? Jokwa? What's it? Zhonghua.
Yeah. They also
Essentially, yeah. So, but see, the law didn't say that an internet business here cannot produce content. It just defined the internet business as something like that transmits messages, but this not did not stop an internet business from producing content. Unlike your policy there, so it's quite clearer. So now you have Rappler, which is in the gray area, essentially operating like a mass media in terms of content production, but residing in a new media environment. Because it's purely online. So the laws against mass media companies, uh, being radio, TV, and print, are sometimes, when you apply to internet companies, are questioned because they say, "Oh, we're not part of the what the Constitution says." I'll give you an example. For TV and radio, there's a movie, television review and classification board. So whatever is shown on TV and radio, except for news, has to be reviewed by a classification board. There is no similar system for online content. And the charter for that review board has not changed. So it's still movie, television review, or movie, television, not radio, movie, television review and classification board.
Um, right now, I think there isn't a regulation into the online content, but
Yeah.
but recently we're having a really hot debate on the OTT law. I don't know if you heard of that. It
Oh no, but maybe you can. Yeah.
it's a because they try to regulate our government NCC try to regulate OTT streaming services and try to set a similar but less uh, but looser, not so tightly controlled rules to the content as well. But it's still in the process, and there are uh, uh, lots of different voices on both sides. Yeah, but if that passed, Taiwan will be the first country to have the law that is directly to streaming services and the platforms.
Yeah, actually the movie and television review and classification board wanted to include Netflix into its fold, but there has been it didn't really prosper. People were not very happy with it, but it tried to include Netflix movies into its review. But then there's argument that Netflix is not mass medium because it's me personal subscription to my personal device. Uh, because on our TV we have the rating system. Before every television show, it says this is for 13 years old and below. This is for parental guidance, etc. But there's no system for Netflix from a uh, government perspective. It is parental controls you set on your own, right? But it's not mandated by government. So I think that's along the line of the regulation. How do we regulate the OTT?
Yeah, we do have the law in the process, so it says that it's going to hurt the industry because it says that it's too strict and maybe the platforms, because Taiwan is also a relatively small market. If we have a lot of regulation, then maybe it will reduce the incentives for them to develop Taiwanese content uh, or develop the, because Netflix also have a lot of Taiwanese content right now. So, but if we do that, they might stop producing or co-producing with Taiwan, which is kind of a controversial issue here. But I think the EU is doing another way to regulate the OTT. Although I'm not really, I'm not really familiar with what exactly they're doing, but I think they're doing so far. They're seeing some progress.
Okay, and how about the? Do you think because in the Philippines it seems like even with the newer platforms, the older the older elite which owns the companies still are able to enter the new businesses. Do you find the same in Taiwan, where the older companies are the ones still leading the newer media?
No, I think they're left behind.
Ah,
Yeah, and I think uh, the one thing that is kind of people are discussing is that are the streaming services that dominate Taiwan is actually foreign companies as well. So it's a serious issue that a local OTT only gain a little audience, or they have to attract audience by free content rather than subscription. And so I think right now foreign streaming services is leading the trend in Taiwan. So Taiwan probably in the future they're trying to cooperate between traditional pay TV channels with the local OTT streaming services to
yeah. There was a study before in Europe by economists, and they found that OTT is a local industry killer. So they're trying to find a way to balance the entry of foreign OTT and the existence or the success of local production companies. Because I like what I showed you here in the Philippines earlier, OTT is already eating into prime time, and prime time is where the money is made by media companies. So if the media companies lose their primetime audience to OTT, which are mainly foreign in content, then that will be a problem because the local industry will die.
I think the situation in Taiwan is quite similar. However, I kind of have a question. Do you think that banning or setting restriction to foreign OTT companies is going to help? Because Taiwan has a case called iQIYI. It's a China platform. It is already banned from Taiwan officially. However, people can still subscribe to ITE through, I think, changing their VPN or underground. So it does not really stop. Maybe just affected a little bit, but not really impactful.
Okay, I think the challenge here is what is called brand loyalty, because to some extent, ABS-CBN and GMA have been successful in nurturing brand loyalty. So Filipinos identify with ABS-CBN, they called family members, and then GMA, they identify as having the same heart or belonging to the same heart. So there's a very strong brand identity. And so the question is how strong this brand identification will be against the entry of foreign content. Well, now the challenge I said earlier is Korean content. Korean content is eating a lot into the time that is spent on Filipino drama. And then people say, oh, Korean drama is better than Filipino drama. And then they'd watch it. So when you watch Korean drama, that means loss of income for the local companies. But this is not new in the Philippines too. Before, we had Mexican drama. We also had Taiwanese drama. F4 was very popular here, and my generation especially. So, but you know, they were able to survive because of this identification about Filipino content, identification with GMA. So I think to answer your question, there's one, of course, the technology aspect, but also the audience cultivation. And ABS-CBN and GMA are able to transition into online media because they are bringing their brand into the platforms. So they're able to maintain their audience because people identify with them across platforms. So in your case, maybe the brand identification is not strong enough.
It's not.
That's why the substitution is easy because it's not like leaving your family for another. But here it's like leaving your family if you shift to another platform or another media outfit.
I think our traditional channel no longer have the concentration, or maybe they will lose power very soon because we don't have that strong brand identification.
Yeah. Oh, very good insight. Okay, oh, we have to mind the time. It's 3:55. So thank you very much for your insights. You're supposed to write an essay for the students in Taiwan. So I am be presenting for the next 2 more weeks. So there's this option, essay option 1. You can choose one of the three, or one of these 5 questions to answer. So in 300 to 500 words, write your answer to one of the following reflection points in this lecture. So this is essay option 1. We'll also have another options for meetings 2 and 3. Okay. I'll share these slides with Andrew, and then Andrew can distribute to you. Okay.
When is the due date?
Oh, after we've completed the 3 sessions. So because I have 3 sessions with you, this is the first one. I'll give you another option next week, and then another option the following week, and then you choose which one you want to answer. And then everything will be reflection essays, 300 to 500 words. Okay? That's it. It's 4 o'clock, and thank you, everyone. I'll see you next Monday. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you,
Bye.
sir.
Thank you, sir. Salamat po.
Thank you. Salamat.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
再见。
Thank you, sir.